Most companies think an executive hire fails because they pick the wrong person, but often the deeper problem is that they diagnose the role incorrectly, misunderstood the team system, or failed to integrate the leader into the business context they were hired to change. At the executive level, hiring is not simply a recruiting decision. It is governance decision, a value creation decision, and often a business risk decision. Today, we are going to talk about executive hire fails, how companies can de-risk leadership transition, what it means to build executive teams as integrated systems, and how technology can support executive search without replacing the human judgment required at the top of the organization. Welcome to another edition of the Smart Office Podcast. I am your host, Hippolyte Asah. I am an AI implementation engineer. I help small businesses use practical AI systems to improve operations, client experience, and growth. Today, I am excited to welcome Craig Devereaux, founder and CEO of Advios Group. Advios Group is an executive talent advisory firm focused on leadership continuity, governance, and value creation for private equity and Fortune 1000. The firm helps CEOs, CHROs, and C-suite leaders build executive teams that perform as integrated systems, not just collections of strong individuals. Craig, welcome to the Smart Office Podcast.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to it. And that was a good summary of the business.
Right. Yeah, Craig. So that was interesting. So Advios, has an interesting perspective because your work really seems to go beyond traditional executive search. Many firms help companies find senior leaders, but Advios appears to focus on what happens before and after the hires as well. So it was an interesting angle there. So diagnosing the real business need, understanding the executive team system, and helping the new leaders integrate so they can create impact faster. That is very, very important because a bad executive is not just expensive, it can damage momentum, stakeholder confidence, and team alignment and value creation. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Alive, breathing, happy to be here. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona today, so it's very hot here. But
yeah, I can imagine.
Staying hydrated. How about yourself? How are you doing?
Good. I'm in Toronto, Canada. So it's the temperature is good. I like it. This is the best time of the season. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. We enjoy it, but it doesn't last forever. So we make the most out of it, right? So we're going to talk about a lot of things valuable for CEOs, HROs, private equity leaders, board members, founders, a lot of things that in between. And for people who are listening, everyone listening, today's conversation is going to be like, we're going to talk about executive hiring. Hiring often fails. Why executive hiring often fails, and even when the candidate looks excellent on paper, right? I'm going to talk about how technology actually support this talent search, advisory, candidate analysis, reporting, integration, while keeping judgment and stakeholders trust human-led. So it's really going to talk about Advios. Craig is going to let us know what's happening in that area. There are many, many people who really want to listen and understand what's going on. Craig, so let's start. Before we get into the executive hiring and leadership continuity, can you share your story? What led you into talent acquisition, executive search, and eventually at Advios Group?
Yeah, so I started in talent acquisition way back in 2009 time frame. I needed a job back then, and one of my friends was the director of marketing, actually the VP of marketing for a medical headhunting firm. So I took that on and started my journey in the talent acquisition recruiting world. I took a little break to go get some advanced level degrees in theology and history, but came back to it. Went back into it at the academic level, recruiting students as well as teachers. And then executive, support and office administrative staff for educational institutions. And then I moved into headhunting. I worked for a boutique firm that was eventually acquired by one of the largest, most prestigious firms in the country. But while I was there, one of my clients poached me. So he told me to come on and work for him. And that was a technology business that was co-headquartered in Paris, France, and at the time, Scottsdale, Arizona. So a lot of fun there. And I ran all the recruiting for North America, South America. I helped with some stuff over in England. And then we were really the center point of excellence. And I rewrote all of the sort of modus operandi documents, if you will, for the
Right.
global TA team while there. And then from there, moved on, managed a team at a rapidly growing construction company that specialized in not only doing construction, but also bringing technological advancement to the construction industry, doing a lot of really cool things. Took a small stint at a Fortune 1000 commercial real estate company and managed the team that did all the recruiting for the Google project. And then I helped build basically a startup. I was there for almost 4 years. It was like a file transfer, managed file transfer, a
Mm.
lot of sort of back end, really important work that companies need done. And I was their main head recruiter, and I helped build that function from the ground up. And after about 4 years there, on the urging of my wife, I decided to start my own business because I saw a need in the industry, some pain points at my wife's level. She's actually an executive of a multi-billion-dollar international media business, and some of the stuff that she was going through and dealing with when it came to executive search and executive hiring, and some of the problems her and her company were solving, and some of my own experiences. I said, well, wait a second, I think we can do this a
Exactly.
little bit differently and a little bit better and solve a different kind of problem than the traditional executive search firm. And so I started Advios, and yeah, here we are. I'm sitting in as the CEO and founder, and I have a director of operations, and we have some extended partners that we that we leverage on some engagements and for certain things in certain areas. But yeah, that's kind of the story of how I got here.
Wow, that's it sounds like that was interesting. That's an interesting journey. Like, it sounds like you landed it by accident. But what about somebody who wants to be in the same, who wants to pursue the same career? Like, you sounded like you didn't come out like directly saying, "Well, this is what I want to do," but came across like an accident. But if you want to advise somebody who's thinking, well, maybe this is something I may want to start, maybe a boutique search or executive search or a firm or a boutique, what background or what kind of advice would you give that person?
Yeah, I think the background question is not terribly relevant
Yeah,
in talent acquisition per se, other than can you think, right? You need to
right,
be able to do things. Can you think through problems and solutions? And then are you good with people?
right,
And can you pay attention to the people dynamic? Because one thing about recruiting that's different in the talent acquisition side or the people side of the business is yes, we're solving problems that we can make more efficient, we can get better at, we can leverage technology to do better, but we also have to manage human emotions and
right.
human logic and human perspectives and human engagement. And so it's good to solve problems. It's good to be operationally minded. It's good
Mhm.
to be, efficient. It's good to want to be productive, but you also have to be good with people. And so I think, if you wanted to go into business or into a business where you can have impact on both how the company runs and the people side of it, anything in the HR talent acquisition, executive recruiting space is probably pretty good. For people who don't like being on the phone a lot and cold calling or being
Right,
rejected, I would say try to find a way into a a, a business, a company, and run like on an internal talent acquisition team. Executive search is going to put a lot of pressure on people to make a lot of cold calls and cold outreach pretty early, and that can turn a lot of people off. It's a volume game most of the time.
right.
And so, but that's a good route for people if they're a little bit more,
Mhm.
they can accept some risk and they're not afraid to, call strangers and talk to them about potentially what's going on inside their business and solving their problems with
Right.
people.
So, what problem did you see in executive search, or for example, or leadership hiring that made you believe Advios needed to exist? Like now you decided to say, okay, I think we need to create Advios.
Yeah. So it's two sides of the same coin, if you will. So it's a little bit of a multi-layer problem. Problem number one is the vast majority of executive search and even the vast majority of talent acquisition is it's optimized to find and place a candidate, right? But it's not necessarily optimized, nor is it engaged beyond the placement, right? So on the executive search side, the traditional firm is solving the problem. How do I find a candidate faster, right? What's my speed to placement and time to fill, so to speak?
Right.
That's a really important problem to solve, and it's a really important problem to continue to solve. It's not like that's not a good problem.
Mhm.
It's just to me, it doesn't go far enough. And then when you look into the data and of all the executives I've talked to and worked with and all the research I have done, I mean, the reality is 50% of executives across all swaths, the sizes of businesses, right, are failing roughly every 18 to 24-ish months. Well, that's a lot of failing in a
Right.
short amount of time for people that have such impactful roles in the life of business, right? And so one of the things I looked at, and especially talent acquisition teams and HR teams, they focus a lot on. So the talent acquisition team focuses on the recruiting, so the finding and placing, right? And then the HR team focuses on the onboarding. But I started asking the question, well, is onboarding enough? And what does onboarding actually mean? And in most cases, onboarding means let me get you operational.
Right.
And I started asking the question, well, how can you get somebody more, not just productive, but performant? Right. How can we do that? So it goes beyond just onboarding and into integration or installation. And I started thinking about it for a SaaS business. Well, when you integrate or buy a piece of technology, well, how do companies go through the discovery, the prep, and then ultimately integrating that piece of technology into their ecosystem? And I thought, well, on a different sort of medium, we can do the same sort of thing with people, right? Why not be just as rigorous in the implementation of a person into a business and a team and a system as we are with pieces of technology? And so, you know, I saw that, and then underneath some of that, the reality is executive search firms are charging a lot of money, and that's okay. It's a really important service. I just don't think it goes far enough. It puts the burden of performance and success solely on the hiring company, not on the executive search firm that is taking the money to do the search. And so the search is often disconnected from actual performance and the business outcomes and what the business needs to do over the next 6, 12, 18, 24, even 36 months. And so I wanted to solve the executive failure problem. And I saw there's two sides of it. You need to get really crystal clear on what the mandate is early. You need to get your critical stakeholders aligned on that mandate and the profile. That allows you to run a more precise search, right? When you're finding candidates, when you're interviewing candidates, calibrated interviews that actually make sense and pull out information from the candidate to see if they are actually aligned to the mandate. Can they do what they say they can do, and can they move this business forward in the way that we need, right? That's a really important question. And then that helps drive a better integration. So you're not just hiring a very talented operator and a skilled operator to in a silo. You have to integrate them into a team because the team needs to work together, especially at the executive level, so that the business can actually function well and be healthy.
Oh, that's cool. So when a CEO, like a CHRO, private equity sponsor, or board member hears the name Advios Group, what do
Mhm.
you want them to understand about your approach?
Yeah, I think we kind of just went
Right.
into it a little bit, right? But
Yeah.
the one liner is it's executive search that goes further, right? We go
Right.
beyond the rec, beyond the search, and we go deep inside the organization, the executive's performance on the team,
Right.
right? So we are trying to optimize the executive search process. Let me rephrase that. We are
Right.
optimizing the executive search process and calibrating it to executive performance individually as well as a team. And so if they want a healthy leadership team and a healthy
Right.
business, they think of Advius. They think of us as the ones to not only find the right people, but to install the right people and then to continue to optimize and upgrade their leaders over time.
Well, that's okay. That's right. Cool. Cool. I mean, I've seen some of your writing. You've written about executive hiring mistakes and
Mhm.
how good companies end up with bad hires. From your perspective, why do executive hires fail even when the resume looks very strong?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the answer is going to be, in my opinion, it's a little bit frustrating
Right.
because I've committed this crime myself. You we fall in love with pedigree,
Right.
right? We fall in love with universities, schools, what
Okay.
companies, what are the company names on all these resumes? Oh my gosh, they have this, they worked at this company for that person. They went to these schools, got these degrees. Bam, they've got to be good, right?
Mhm.
And we forget that while pedigree is important to some extent,
Right.
pedigree does not determine whether or not somebody can function well in my particular context, nor does it mean that they can actually do the job that we need them to do. And so I think far too often companies hire executives based on pedigree because they think that's going to be the thing that allows somebody to be best able to move the business. And, you know, as you've probably seen, that doesn't always work. I mean, there's companies, Starbucks is a famous example, right? They had, a highly pedigreed person from McKinsey, the greatest consulting company in the world. And I mean, he lost the company $34 billion in 18 months, couldn't run the business, just didn't know how to run
Yeah.
the business. So, and also I think we over index too much on past success without mapping the skills and the experience and the wisdom required to
Mhm.
achieve that success to the need of the current business, right? So
Right.
while I won in one context, it doesn't mean I'm going to win in a new context, right? There
Mhm.
has to be there
Different
has
contexts.
right. There has to be systemic alignment. And I mean that at like a system level more than just, hey, I can solve that problem, right? I
Mhm.
can solve that problem in a way that this new organization will actually receive and do well in. And so,
Right.
I think that's important to look at. And then the second thing, most higher sales, because, and I hear this all the time, I've heard this multiple times, what sort of scaffolding or help or support do these new executives need around them when they enter in to be successful? And here's the common response. They're an executive. Let them figure it out. Right. But you would never do that with a piece of technology. You wouldn't do that with a new teammate if you were playing sports. You have
Right.
to introduce them and integrate them into the system that they're joining so that they can be successful in that system. And so I think those two or three things are the top reasons why
Yeah.
executive hires fail
Are there
consistently.
any are there any early signs? Are there any early warnings that you may like? Okay, you know what? Maybe this may not work.
Yeah, I mean, there's the early warnings are pretty simple, right? And the number one thing that you can start doing is talking to the team, right? Their direct reports and then the peer level people. Are they building trust early, right? Do they actually understand the business after 30 to 45 days? Measure their level of understanding of the business, right? And if they talk more about their expertise and their all this other stuff or their assessment of the business, but it sounds like they're talking from above or outside of the context, that's a big red flag, right? They're spending more time trying to establish their dominance or their superiority. In some ways, that's needed, but in most ways, you really have to understand what you're coming into, and it takes time to do that, right? Seek to understand. And when an executive's not seeking to understand, that's a red flag. When they're making promises but not following through, so the trust begins to erode. They haven't built the right kind of peer trust with their peers or their direct reports, right? That's a second red flag. And then the other one is, when you think about, layers and levels of influence, authority or title based power is often what somebody's going to lapse into or leverage to get people to do things early on. And I think that's another major, major red flag. And then secondarily, if by the end of 90 days, there's not a lot of clarity on what the next 12 to 18 months looks like, that's also a red flag.
Gives, I mean, a lot of them are listening, and hopefully they are taking notes. They're going to listen and take notes and make sure they get their stuff done within 90 days. What should let's come back to companies because it may, from what you've said, it may only not be an issue with the executive. They, they,
Right.
they need to have a team. They need to
That's
have
right.
a team. They need to understand what's happening. What should companies diagnose before they write the job description for an executive role, rather than just say you should go figure it out? Probably they should come up with some points.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what they should assess and look for before they ever write a job description or a mandate for a role, a couple things, right? They need to do some self assessment. Are they, to use Patrick Lencioni for a minute, his distinction between a team and a working group, right? What kind of system are we? Are we actually a team? Is there shared responsibility, a shared sense of accountability for the company goals and the company movement? Or is it just a collection of highly performing,
Mm,
extremely capable individuals that are kind of operating on, well, as long as I'm good, I'm good. And it doesn't
good.
matter what the rest of you do, right? I think they need to diagnose that first. And while I do believe that teams are far better and far more effective than working groups, it's important to know what kind of context that you are. So when you are recruiting somebody in, you can at least speak intelligently to that context and
Right.
they can start to think about how would I assimilate or adjust to this context if I were to join it, right? and somebody who's going to work better on a team or somebody who's going to work better in a working group. That could be really interesting in terms of the kind of
Mhm.
person you're looking for beyond the resume and the pedigree. Secondly, I think as they think about this mandate, they think they should have a shared sense on the executive team and at
Right.
least key stakeholders. What problems still need to be solved?
Mhm.
What problems have we had trouble solving? If we're replacing somebody, what was it about this other person? Why couldn't they solve the problems that we needed them to solve? Why didn't we trust them enough to continue their engagement with us as a company? Right? What's missing? And then I think the other thing is if a company can really evaluate, and again, this is before they ever put pen to paper on a job description or even thinking about the job. If we were to hire a new executive in just about any role, right?
Mhm.
But in this particular role we're thinking of, what are all the possible ways that this person could fail? How
Right.
could we as a business reject them, no matter
Right.
how good they are, no matter how pedigreed they are, and start to think about are some of those things, can we begin to iron those out and work on those before we even go to market on recruiting a new candidate? Or
Mhm.
are some of these things what we need a new candidate to start resolving, right? Like maybe there's heavily dense political structures that just are not trustworthy and there's a lot of land grabbing and there's landmines everywhere. Well,
Mhm.
can that be solved, right? Is there a real authority hierarchy, and when the CEO or an executive passes on a decision or delegates, are they delegating authority as well, right?
Right.
And empowering. Those kinds of things need to be evaluated before you ever put pen to paper. Once you decide to put pen to paper on a particular role, then it's like, I think really a couple things really need to be
Mhm.
asked. One, what's the mission of this role? Why does this role exist and what is it meant to accomplish? And two, what are those core objectives, right? 3 to 4 really critical core business objectives that if the person can do this over the next 18 to 24 months, we are really our business is moving in the right direction, right?
Right.
And then secondarily, then reevaluate, and are our key stakeholders, the decision makers or the people that will be impacted by this or have to interact with this person on a consistent basis, do they align on that mandate? Lack of alignment and lack of role clarity are the two biggest reasons why you hire the wrong executive. You hire the right person into the wrong role.
Well, okay. That's interesting. Let me ask you about Avios. You talked about the emphasize a proven system for hiring and integrating executives who deliver impact within 120 days or less. Emphasize on that. What has uh, what has to happen in those first 120 days for a leader to succeed?
Yeah, I think we already mentioned a little bit of it, but one,
Right.
they actually
Yeah.
understand the business,
Yeah.
right? They really do. They have some coaching, whether
Right.
that's by an external firm. In my case, we can do that, or they have their peer coach. And in a lot of cases, it's their HR business partner, right?
Right.
They understand what the mandate is. And so they're learning that. They're learning the business context. They're learning the nuances of the business, the cultural
Right.
context. They're building the strategic trust with the right people. So they're getting involved in these meetings, and there's one-on-ones that are tailored that
Hmm.
have real reasons why these one-on-ones exist. It's not to just, talk about the weather, right? There's
Hmm.
business needs to move. And so are these one-on-ones calibrated actually getting to know people?
Hmm.
We built a customized stakeholder map that teaches and guides a new executive relationally through all of the critical stakeholders align on his peer team. If
Hmm.
there's a board, the board members, and then all their direct reports, right? And that map is, here's what motivates me, here's what demotivates me, here's how I problem solve, here's my communication style, here's how to gain my trust, here's how to lose my trust, here's all the
Right.
things in life that I like, here's my personal goals, my professional goals, my financial goals, right? And those types of things. And then behind the scenes, there's an operational manual about, okay, well, as you get to know these people, how can you how can you encourage each of your people? How
Right.
can you equip them to do the job that they need to get done based on your new assessment of it, what you need to do as an executive, and then how can you empower them to do that? I think early on in the first 60 days, 60 to 90 days, that's the work that needs to be done. And then around the 60-ish day mark, what I like to see is I like to see a 360 feedback session and how well this new executive can take critical feedback early and then turn it into action.
Action.
Or are they going to let it get to them? And so then you can also see in 60 days, within another 60 days, well, can this person actually take feedback and do something with it? Right. So that's a critical live moment. But yeah, I think those are some of the critical things that they can do to get impactful really fast.
Oh, that's nice. That's very interesting. A lot of people really do not know how to go around this 360 kind of life cycle during their early days. So I probably should have asked you this question earlier, but I want to know for those who may be listening, they may want to know what separates an executive search firm from an executive talent advisory partner.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. So the simple answer is executive search firms focus on the search, right?
Right,
You have a need. You call me and say, "Hey, Craig, I need to hire a new name the role," right?
right,
Go find the role. Here's the mandate. Here's the job description. Here's all the stuff. Here's the compensation package. Here's the location. All the things that we need to know. Go. And then I, as the recruiter, I, as the executive search consultant, will go and I'll do a bunch of sourcing. I'll do a bunch of pre-screening, and then I will present you with a slate of candidates. You decide which ones you want to move forward with. Let's say you pick 3 or 4. I will then kind of be on the back end doing some just coordinating in those interviews and making sure that the process is moving and they're talking to the right people. Feedback is going from you to the candidate, from the candidate back to you. Then once you agree on the candidate you want to hire, I help negotiate that. You guys all come to an agreement. They sign the offer letter. They get to day 1. Boom, my job is done. Now I may do the obligatory 30, 60, 90, 120-day check-ins. Just, hey, how's it going? Right? Those are like 8 minutes long, 5 minutes long, and click.
uh,
There's no engagement or there's no accountability to that executive's performance or the team's well-being that they're joining, right? And I
right,
think
yeah,
executive talent advisory could be a number of things. The way Advios is defining it is we stick around for the 120-day integration that we co-create with every client.
right,
And we also offer continued executive coaching, both one-on-one and team coaching, to continue to up level performance, right? It
right,
doesn't mean that the team's poorly performing. It means that the team's continuing to up level and upskill and all the things. Other executive talent advisory businesses might run searches, but they also might run coaching engagements.
right.
They might give you like some analysis and data. They might do some organizational design work for you. Our work is more executive recruiting, integration, and organizational development, that's where our coaching is, right? That's how you
Yeah,
build, make an org better.
I see.
So I think executive talent advisories go deeper into like the organizational design and or org development in some capacity, whereas executive search firms do not.
Right. Wow. So that adds coaching aspect into it, making sure there is success at the end. So it gives a probably higher percentage of success in that
Yes.
regard, right? Okay. So let's talk about Advios quick. Let's talk about Advios Group. As Advios Group continues to grow, what business priority are you most focused on improving right now? Is it would it be acquiring more executive search clients, increasing retained searches, or improving the system, or
Yeah.
what was the
Yeah. I
business
think
priority?
working with more clients, right? I think
Right.
that's the biggest thing that we're focused on right now.
Mhm.
We we have some target niches that we operate really well with, technology, automotive, and media. Media could be telecom, anything like that. Or
Right,
in any of those, there's also the Venn diagram of the overlaps, right? There's automotive technology companies, there's automotive
right.
media companies, right, et cetera. So we operate really well there. We have a pretty well refined like framework, and
Mhm.
then we can tailor that process in. So we operate specifically in the retained model. We don't do any contingent searches. We don't engage in that. We do retained. And then the other part that we're building out is our coaching presence even
Right,
more. So we've shifted this year a little bit, and that 120-day integration that we tie to every executive search, we also are beginning to test offering that as a standalone solution or service
yeah,
offering out. Like our flagship service is an executive search plus the 120-day integration,
right,
in which a company gets their executive team gets 3 team coaching sessions, and then the executive gets, executive coaching usually every other week, one-on-one sessions through the first 120 days, right? That's part of the search process. We're playing with, or we're testing offering that 120-day integration installation plan as a standalone service to where if a company hired somebody, we can run that. Or if they have a struggling executive, we can basically run that as though they just started and see if we can repair. And then the other part is just, better executive coaching clients, right? We want to continue to up level teams and give them the skill sets and the mindsets and the belief
Right.
system and the tactics to collate as teams, not just working groups, and to develop their future leaders in their organizations for higher performance, right? And so we're really focused on more retained clients that lead into longer executive coaching engagements. But we our flagship service is the executive search plus the integration. And the more we do that and the more success we get to document, I think the more we can help not only other executive search firms, but also a lot of companies as well and individual leaders that are joining new companies. You know, the questions are, can I be successful here? That's what you will ask yourself if you're going into a new role. Well, the company you're joining is asking a couple of questions. Am I getting the right person? Are they going to make any sort of impact early? And are they going to be around in a couple of years? Those are the three questions the vast majority of executives are asking when they go to search. Well, we're answering those questions positively for all parties.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. That's very interesting. So, where do you see technology, artificial intelligence? Where can it create the most practical value in executive search and talent acquisition or talent advisory?
Yeah, I think at least in my capacity, right, or
Right.
my context, I can't speak for the entire executive talent advisory industry. But the way I see it is it can help with general like pattern recognition
Mm,
from candidates to contexts.
right.
And we can begin to create, you know, maybe more predictive models around the likelihood of a successful integration, right?
Right.
Not just of a successful placement.
Hmm.
I think AI can do a lot of work to
Hmm.
help us in that regard. It'll be more recommendation oriented
Right.
right now, but if we build it well, it could get more and more predictive, right?
Right.
Outside of the I feel like or my sixth sense says,
Hmm.
I think there's data around that, or I have a gut feeling. Okay, well, our guts don't make decisions or don't get feelings in
Right.
vacuum.
Right.
There's reasons. And so I think that's going to be a big one, in my opinion, is some of that more predictive nature around successful integrations. I think the other thing, as we do more diagnostic work, AI can get really, really good at helping us as practitioners and
Right.
and see gaps and holes we might not otherwise see, right? It can see things that we might not, or help us ask better, deeper questions to get at the whole context, so we're not missing things, and it can challenge our biases, right? And so as much as you and I might say we can approach this thing with objectivity, I'm just a big believer that no one can approach anything with pure objectivity. I just don't think that's
Right.
possible. So it can help us understand our own biases and maybe see past them or beyond them, or at least be aware of them, right?
Okay.
And we think about that. So that's also a governance, right? That's a risk mitigation factor, so that
Hmm.
there's not a bunch of risk coming back to us or the business. I mean, a lot of companies out there are like, "Hey, we're going to build AI to do all this candidate sourcing and all this matching and all that stuff." And while I think that's reasonable to consider that that's possible, I
Right.
still think the best executive advisory firms are going to leverage data to have better business conversations, and some of that matching, they're going to want to know all the data on both sides to understand the match, right? They're not. I don't want to lean on AI to do the matching for me.
Hmm.
I want to just understand and be able to assess larger quantities of data and
Of it.
information about candidates and my client, so that
Right.
I can make more informed decisions and recommendations for my client and the candidates I'm representing. So I think AI is going to do a lot of really good there on the back end.
Hmm.
A lot of good workflow, optimization. I think that's happening a lot. And then for clients unlike us, but some that are large, much, much larger than us,
Hmm.
you can have AI that can be like scanning the existing database
Right.
for recommendations on potential matches to engagements that are put into their systems. Right.
Right.
And so that,
Right.
that way we don't have to spend as much time manually thinking through,
Manuality.
right? And then I can have better conversations with candidates as I'm preparing them and seeing, hey, is this something you're interested in? And then when I do present a candidate to a client, there's a much more aligned data set as to why I'm presenting that particular candidate. The other thing I think AI can help do as well is it can help evaluate context where
Mm-hmm.
certain businesses that may be like globally recognized brand name businesses,
Mm-hmm.
but are smaller than some. And, I think about certain telecommunications companies, and there's some smaller players in like the Arizona region. Well, they might not, while they're recruiting at the executive level, there's one in Arizona I'm thinking of in particular, you know, they might want to go after like the Comcasts or the Altices of the
Mm-hmm.
world. But the challenge is those are Fortune 500 businesses, and the one I'm thinking of in Arizona is not. It is actually quite different. They only have 96 total employees. Yes, they're growing as a business, but somebody from the Comcast might not actually do well because Comcast is big, and so it has a lot more resources, et cetera. So you might need somebody from more like a startup, right? Who's
Right.
generating momentum, et cetera. That's just an idea maybe that like AI can help us think outside the box depending on
Outside the
certain
box.
contexts. So that way we're not just presenting the same slate of candidates from the same players of companies, which is what most of the big firms do. Kudos to them for having those
Right.
relationships. But it's a tried and true method that doesn't work in all. It's not a one size fits all.
Right. So, what's your area of operation? Is it, do you have a limit? I know you've been all over the world, but do you have, does Advios operate all over the world or just in Arizona area?
Well, we bedrock in Arizona because that's where we
Right.
are. That's where we're based. But we specialize predominantly through the US. We can do work in Canada. Like I said, I've run Canadians like searches and all of our practices at two companies in Canada, right?
Okay.
I know how to operate in Canada and those types of things and can definitely help there. We have some relationships with a couple of people, one in the Asia Pacific area and then another one in France. Not a company I previously worked with, but so there's some potential for us to go global, but our main focus right now is predominantly
Yeah.
North America and really tightening that focus into like automotive media tech. We'd really like to see companies that are either in early growth stage that have decent funding and need to hire teams that have never hired teams, or they're in some sort of transformation all the way up to a Fortune 1000 type of business that they need to really transform or transition their team from one thing that was not working or is not ready for the future into what is. And so that's where we are. But we can go global, but our focus really here is on the US.
Right. So, where do you see the market stand? I mean, we're in 2026, mid 2026. Where do you see, what's the trend like? Is it in maybe executive search hiring or the recruitment industry or the market or the labor? What's happening?
That's a really hard question right now because AI is displacing everything, right? It's challenging all parts of the market. I think one of the trends that we've seen, at least in the US, a lot of layoffs, right?
Right.
We've seen a ton of layoffs.
Is it the layoffs? Is it in the which category? Is it executives, mid level, entry level? What have you observed?
Kind of both. Well, all, right? The downside to the executives is it tends not to be as loud, right? Because there's less
Okay.
of them. So we see a lot
Okay.
more of the mid-range layoffs, the early, like the junior level staff or the redundant level staff, all the way up to mid, like our senior level. But you don't tend to see it as much in the management layer unless it's middle management. I think Meta
Yep.
was famous for kind of gutting its middle management.
Hmm.
And But what I definitely see is there's a trend that's a lot of good hiring that's taking place. Companies are hiring, at least in the US, they're hiring more HR leaders and more talent professionals than I've seen in probably the last like 2 or 3 years. And the
Right.
signal to me is the pressures that businesses are facing right now are requiring a leaders to have a different capacity for leadership. And so executive and senior level leadership hiring, I definitely think I know is on the rise for sure. And then that's going to lead to more mid to senior level hiring as we figure out and we get better at understanding and knowing, well, what kind of people do we need to be hiring as AI continues to take shape, right?
Right.
But leadership hiring is a premium. I do think executive and senior level leadership hiring is an absolute premium. And that's also because COVID exacerbated the work from home scenario, which
Mm.
left a bit of a bigger gap to bridge
Right.
in the executive leadership development track or the succession pipelines for these executives and senior leaders. That's just not there like it used to be. And so I think, that's going to put a good pressure on my industry and people like me to really step in and not only find the right kinds of people, but help these businesses integrate them well, develop them well, and then build executive leadership development tracks alongside them.
So if you want to advise somebody based on your observation who is in the executive, who may be a candidate, or let's start with a candidate or client, let's start with a candidate, what would you advise them to do in this market, in this labor market, in order
Yeah, if
to
you're
get
looking
ahead?
to transition,
Yeah.
tap into your warm network, right? First of all, ask your peers, hey, and let them know that you're kind of thinking about that and start to scope out who do you want to work for, who do you want to work with, and what kind of work do you want to continue to do or start doing that you haven't already done, right? And then if your warm network's small, and some executives are, their networks are quite small because they get heads down, right? When you are thinking about reaching out, start networking. Reach out to people that you want to work with at some point in time and just start building a professional relationship. Offer some value, right? Offer some insight. Offer just to be a thought partner in the industry for a while. Don't just constantly ask for what you want, right?
For
Or
money.
don't ask about yourself. I think as a candidate, that's critical. If you're an executive level candidate, I would say don't waste your time applying to roles. Spend your time networking and reaching out and building and strengthening relationships and understand that that process, while it's a longer term play,
Right.
it's a much more substantial and effective play at the executive level because you take you turn the executive recruiting and your own kind of self recruiting,
Hmm.
you turn it from transaction to a relationship to how can I offer some support and advice and how can I actually help, right? What can I give to somebody else? So you take that from a like I said, a transaction to a relationship. I think those are the big keys, right? Make sure your resume actually talks about your achievements and your accomplishments and how, right? Not just, hey, I did, I achieved, 95% AI adoption
Hmm.
by that. Why is that a relevant metric? Why
Right.
is it an achievement, right?
Hmm.
Do that on your resume, do that on your LinkedIn. Be willing to talk about it. And as you see as an executive, as you see other companies that you want to potentially go work with, bring some of that insight to the table and say, hey, I might even be assuming something here, but these are some problems I've run into. My guess is you probably are to some extent. Your team's probably already on it. And here's some things I've found. Would this be valuable to you? Would you be open to just kind of sharing some ideas on how to solve that problem? You're not asking for a job. You're not asking
Right.
for, you're just creating a relationship. I think that's really important. Secondarily, I think from the client side of things, which you're getting ready to ask, they need
Right.
to do something similar. Build a bench, start targeting and identifying who inside your company is got the potential and the capacity to operate at the executive level.
Right.
And then when you have gaps, well, who's the who's who in your areas that you want to maybe start building a relationship with,
Right.
so that when you do have that need, you have a warm conversation already built and somebody maybe already bought into where you're going as a business. And so it can shorten the recruiting pipeline. That's just, I mean, pipelining 101, right? And so but I think companies generally don't do a good job of that. And if we can get back to the foundational basics of recruiting, I think that's a really big thing that a company could do and a board could do. Also, get really crystal clear on what you think your problems are so that when you talk to people, you have a baseline to understand how they might bring solutions to the table that work for your business.
Great. So, Craig, if candidates or clients want to get in contact with you, Advios, or maybe become candidates or become clients, what's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's probably the number one way, as unfortunately and fortunately, we spend a lot of time there. Or email me, Craig at adviosgroup.com. That's another really good way. I see that. We see that. And our response times, those are the things that we see the most and the fastest. So if you reach out on our company page, we see that too. That actually gets rerouted to me directly. But yeah, either LinkedIn or Craig at adviosgroup.com is the number one. Those are the two best ways.
And they could see, I mean, a lot of clients that equally visit your website and see what Advios Group has to offer.
Yep.
Based out of Arizona, operates in North America, most especially and probably around the world. So you could definitely reach Craig anytime
Yes. Thank
of
you.
the day. So, Craig, thank you very much for joining me on this Smart Office podcast. I really appreciate your insights and your leadership, your governance, your value creation, why successful executive hiring requires both the right person and the right system around it. It's really enriching and very inspirational to understand. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Hippolyte. It was fun. Thanks for having me.